Oh, she is mega pissed, dude. She looks like my mom after this one time when I posted a photo of her taking a shit online. Oh man, it was a funny picture though. My mama, her face was so red and it just looked like she was so focused. What the? My body part's on the move. It's inside the queen. Oh, come on now.
Far Cry 5 Lost on Mars is the second installment of the first Season Pass DLC content for the game. We already got the bite-sized Vietnam adventure with Hours of Darkness, and now we get another self-contained Martian-themed adventure. This time around, it's filled to the brim with dick jokes as you're accompanied by the raunchy redneck Herc, who is a somewhat popular character from the base game, probably one of the more recognizable characters. The intro story animations hit you with a Close Encounters of the Third Kind style alien abduction / teleportation sequence. You, a cow, and a truck all get beamed directly to Mars. And if you thought the normal Far Cry 5 storyline was wacky, well then prepare yourself for hillbillies in space, complete with giant alien spiders, evil AI robots, and, well actually I was going to say a lot more, but that's pretty much all there is. Now, there are a few spoilers ahead, but I honestly believe that the plotline of this entire game can basically be deduced within the first 10 minutes of gameplay. The character dialogue is constantly hitting you over the head with painfully obvious setups and foreshadowing during the 3 to 4 hours it'll take you to complete the story missions. Now, unlike Hours of Darkness, the first DLC, you can't simply run to an extraction point while bypassing the quest. This time around, you have to activate 19 terminals scattered around a large Martian crater. Sound familiar? Well, it shouldn't. These aren't towers in any way at all. They're in fact highly advanced Martian terminals that are, well, okay, it's basically a bunch of tower activation quests. Even after Far Cry 5's character dialogue literally made fun of the previous games for having too many tower missions, this entire campaign is just a series of terminal quests, not to be confused with tower quests. Along the way, you're also tasked with finding the lost body parts of your friend Herc, because that's funny, I think. He was a floating head and his body parts are scattered throughout Mars for some reason. As far as I can tell, there's no reason for this other than it allows the game to let Herc follow you around with his mind downloaded into a spherical hovering robot, bandana and all. Ubisoft definitely saved some design budget there without having to worry about human AI pathfinding getting around a rugged Martian landscape. They must have learned a trick or two from Bungie game development.
We always visit such cheerful places.
Now, the spherical Herc will be your comic relief for basically the whole adventure, so depending on whether or not you like his sense of humor, it could make or break the experience for you.
Alright, buddy. Brace yourself, you're about to pop a bro boner here. Check it out. Your bad boy Robocop here is fitted with a hole punch and lasers that these spacecrafts don't stand no chance against. And this sexy, delicious, rock-hard body was built to last all kinds of physical and verbal abuse. We're linked up, man, so you can just tell me where to go and I'll follow, man. I won't even argue, like, ever. Unless you say something about monkeys. And if we find ourselves in a pickle and shit gets real intense, you just use me, man. I'll draw these suckers away with my jaw-dropping dance moves and such. Now, I know you're impressed with how impressive I've become, but don't let how impressive I am distract you from the fact that we gotta give our human compadres the heroes they deserve.
Herc was a brief companion during the standard Far Cry 5 campaign, so if you didn't care for him, it only had to be a temporary partnership, but not so much this time around. He does at least serve somewhat of a practical purpose in that he can distract the giant alien Starship Trooper style arachnids from tearing your face off, at least for a little while. By the way, there's tons of giant alien bugs on Mars. Why are there bugs on Mars? Not important. Why is there a supercomputer AI fighting them? Again, not important. This is Hicks in space and apparently anything goes. Far Cry games tend to get quite goofy with the emergent gameplay, but this time around the goofiness is a bit more forced, and frankly they forgot to add in the emergent gameplay. Even from a budget-conscious DLC perspective, I feel like the developers could have remedied the gameplay with some more interesting Martian weapons. It's Mars with crazy technology. Here's what you get to shoot: a beam laser pistol, a normal pistol, a shotgun, and a sniper rifle, and then just basic variations on those types of weapons. Far Cry 5's elaborate bases and booby trap assaults are nowhere to be found, so you basically just run from point to point, shooting giant spiders with your energy weapons until they overheat, and then you switch to a different energy weapon. The grenades, however, do provide a little more creativity in how you play. Some of the grenades set off gases or scents that will make the bugs attack each other. Others will electrocute bugs in place while you shoot them. Beyond that, I didn't find a single opportunity to lure someone into an interesting ambush or get chased down and outsmarted by the AI. It's all pretty basic. Really, the most creative thing I was able to do in combat was just trigger the queen by throwing a scent grenade at her, and then all of her little warrior arachnids would go and attack her, but this seemed pretty basic from a strategic standpoint. Ironically, the alien weapon, the Magna Pulsar from the base game of Far Cry 5, is far more fun and imaginative than any of the weapons in the actual Mars DLC. And this game really could have used some really fun and creative ways of killing your enemies, but instead it's just more of a slugfest against a lot of big, heavy-hitting arachnids that take quite a few shots to take down. Each of them do have their weak points, but some of them can absorb a lot more damage than others. So eventually it just ends up you jumping around with a bunch of different laser weapons, shooting bugs, and then you go and do the same thing somewhere else. Now, something that I thought was going to be a far more interesting mechanic was the fact that if you walk off of hard surfaces like rocks or metal structures onto the sand surface, the bugs will feel your vibrations and come and attack you. They'll go subterranean and pop out of the ground and hit you. And this makes certain parts of the game a little bit more difficult to play on than others, like if you're trying to cross a desert or something like that. Oddly though, the game gives you a jump jet belt right at the start of the gameplay, so you gain the ability to basically avoid sand whenever you really need to. Only occasionally do you actually have to drop down on sand itself. So this interesting, challenging mechanic is basically totally avoidable after the first mission of the game. I thought the whole game was going to play out interestingly, like maybe that Half-Life 2 mission where you have to use like special sensors to distract the ant lions that come out of the sand, and it got more creative and you had to treat it like a puzzle game. But no, unfortunately, this mechanic is really only interesting in the first mission and then never really after you get the belt. Now, unfortunately, there were also several game-breaking bugs that occurred, forcing me to either reload a save point or even quit out of the game and restart it to resume my progress. Within the first 10 minutes of play, one of the crucial dialogue sequences just didn't trigger, and I spent about 8 minutes trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. Then I restarted the game, and the next time it ran, the full dialogue sequence triggered, and it actually opened up the door to the outside Martian surface. Not a great way to start things off. Further down the road, I got stuck in a wingsuit mission that I couldn't back out of, and again was forced to restart the game. Now, despite all the shortcomings of Lost on Mars, it can be fun to use your wingsuit and glide around the low-gravity environment. Those moments remind me a lot of playing the Zelda Breath of the Wild game and jumping off of tall towers and gliding to hard-to-reach locations. There isn't much in the way of climbing or jumping puzzles in this, but some tranquil flying over the alien planet was certainly fun. Ultimately, though, I think the majority of this specific DLC's enjoyable qualities come down to whether or not you enjoy Herc's hillbilly sense of humor, as it's really relentless the entire way through. There's got to be 1,000 lines of dialogue, if not more.
These guys partied hard, man, like too hard. You know what they used to do? They used to blow Blanco up each other's buttholes before shows. Singer said he did it to protect his voice, man, but I still couldn't figure out why the drummer was doing it that way.
On occasion, it did make me laugh, but to be perfectly honest, I would have rather watched something like a 1 to 2 hour stand-up comedy special instead of playing through a painfully predictable and repetitive campaign that, even over the course of 3 hours, had me repeat the same tasks and missions many multiple times. Some people say it's great that Ubisoft is creating unique DLC content for the game, But I think because they are forced to create 3 completely unique and original mini games outside of the base game, the production quality and design ambitions just fall off a cliff, and instead we're left with something that looks and feels different but suffers from inferior gameplay in every way compared to the base game. Even if you are a huge fan of the Far Cry games, the joy I get from the exploratory and emergent gameplay in the base game just isn't represented in this DLC, so it would be hard for me to recommend it even to a Far Cry fan. I'm willing to bet that this DLC is really being held back by just not enough time or budget being able to be spent on each of these little mini games. They feel rushed and like the developers really just had to hold back on any sort of cool or interesting or ambitious features that might make them unique or fun to play beyond the base game. Unfortunately, these just fall short and make me want to play Far Cry 5, the base game, as it was actually really fun, enjoyable, and had tons of emergent gameplay, which this DLC doesn't. Anyway, that wraps it up for this review on the Far Cry 5 Lost on Mars DLC. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the DLC if you played it, and I'll see you next time. This is